Imagine holding in your hand a piece of American history that not only represents 5 cents in value, but also carries the weight of a nation's struggles, triumphs, and transformations. The Jefferson nickel of 1940 is far more than a small coin. Struck in nickel and copper, it is a symbol of an era, a reflection of the United States as it stood on the brink of global conflict, and a continuation of a design that had already begun to carve its place in numismatic history. The story of the 1940 Jefferson nickel begins with its origins just a year after the first issue in 1938, when the United States Mint replaced the long-running Buffalo nickel with a new design honoring the third president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson. The Buffalo nickel had been admired for its artistry, yet it posed challenges in terms of production and durability. Its intricate details often wore down quickly, and the Mint sought a design that would not only be more practical, but also more enduring. The winning design for the Jefferson nickel came from Felix Schlag, a German-born American sculptor whose entry triumphed in the 1938 design competition. Schlag's obverse portrait of Jefferson was a bold, left-facing bust, drawing attention to the intellectual strength of the statesman, while the reverse featured a depiction of Monticello Jefferson's beloved Virginia home, though Schlag's original design underwent modifications imposed by the Commission of Fine Arts and the Mint. The final result was a coin that blended functionality with dignity. The Jefferson nickel would remain in production with various modifications for decades to come, and in 1940 it was still in its infancy as a series. Now let us focus on the historical backdrop of 1940. America was still recovering from the Great Depression. Franklin D. Roosevelt was leading the nation with his New Deal policies, while at the same time preparing for the possibility of war in Europe, although the United States would not enter World War II until December 1941. The events unfolding overseas were already influencing the American economy industry, and public sentiment coins struck in 1940, including the Jefferson nickel, reflected a sense of stability, continuity, and readiness for whatever challenges lay ahead. From a technical standpoint, the 1940 Jefferson nickel was struck in a composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel. The standard alloy used since the coin's introduction, the weight was 5 grams with a diameter of 21. 2 millimeters and a plain edge production took place at 3 mint facilities, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, each producing millions of nickels. Yet with subtle variations that intrigue collectors to this day, the Philadelphia mint coins carried no mint mark. The Denver issues bore a small D mint mark on the reverse to the right of Monticello, and the San Francisco coins carried an S mint mark in the same position. Mintage figures for 1940 are significant. Philadelphia produced over 176 million nickels. Denver struck around 43 million, and San Francisco added nearly 40 million together. These numbers ensured that the coin circulated widely across the country, becoming a familiar presence in pockets, purses, and cash registers. However, within these large mintages, there exist varieties and conditions that make certain examples far more valuable and desirable than others to collectors. The strike quality varied depending on the mint, with some coins showing sharper details, particularly in Monticello's steps, while others suffered from weaker impressions, making the full step designations a key factor in grading. And value collectors of Jefferson nickels often focus on the so-called full steps designation, which refers to the clarity of the steps at the base of Monticello on the reverse. A coin that shows 5 or 6 complete steps without breaks or weakness is considered a full steps example. Such coins are scarce for many years of the series, and the 1940 issue is no exception. While millions of nickels were struck, only a fraction display fully defined steps, and those that do are highly sought after by specialists. High-grade, full steps examples can command impressive premiums at auction, especially when certified by reputable grading services. Beyond the technical details, the 1940 Jefferson nickel holds significance as a coin struck at a crossroads in American history. Collectors often view it as part of the pre-war era, when the design was still new and the nation was still at peace. Within just a few years, the composition of the nickel would change dramatically during World War II, when silver was used in place of nickel to conserve the strategic metal for wartime production. The so-called war nickels issued from 1942 to 1945 stand apart, but the 1940 issue remains a reminder of the last years before that dramatic shift in materials. Errors and varieties of the 1940 Jefferson nickel add another layer of fascination. Among them are double dies, repunched mint marks, and striking anomalies. Some examples show noticeable doubling in the inscriptions or details of Monticello. Others display mint marks that were punched more than once, creating overlapping impressions. These varieties may not be common, but they capture the attention of specialists who scour their collections and rolls of nickels hoping to uncover a hidden rarity. The condition of a 1940 Jefferson nickel plays a crucial role in determining its value circulated. Examples are abundant and usually hold little more than face value unless they exhibit unique characteristics. However, uncirculated coins, especially those with brilliant luster, sharp strikes, and full steps designation, can bring hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on rarity and certification. The grading scale developed by the American Numismatic Association provides a framework for assessing these coins from circulated grades, like good and fine, to mint state levels ranging from MS-60 to MS-67 and beyond. Examples at the highest levels of preservation are exceptionally rare and form the pinnacle of many collections. Over the decades, the Jefferson nickel series has sometimes been overlooked compared to other American coins such as the Lincoln cent or the Morgan silver dollar. Yet it has gained increasing respect among numismatists for its longevity, diversity, and historical context. The 1940 issue in particular has a special place because of its timing in history, its role in the development of the series, and its connection to Jefferson's legacy. As we reflect on this coin, we see more than metal. We see craftsmanship, design, symbolism, and history intertwined. The Jefferson nickel of 1940 speaks to the values of America, the admiration of its leaders, the continuity of its coinage, and the enduring connection between people and the money they use. Each example, whether worn from decades of circulation or preserved in mint state condition, carries with it stories of commerce, survival, and national identity. It is a coin that invites us to look closer, to appreciate the artistry of Felix Schlag, to consider the political climate of the time, and to understand the importance of seemingly ordinary objects in telling the extraordinary story of a nation. So when you hold a 1940 Jefferson nickel in your hand, remember you are not just holding 5 cents. You are holding the legacy of Thomas Jefferson, the creativity of Felix Schlag, the industrial might of the United States Mint, and the resilience of a nation on the verge of historic change. This small coin is a portal into the past, and a reminder of how even the simplest things can carry profound meaning. Imagine holding in your hand a coin that represents not only a small piece of American currency, but also a window into the history of the United States. During one of its most turbulent decades, the Jefferson nickel, minted in 1968, is more than just a 5-cent piece. It is a reflection of American culture, politics, economics, and artistry from the time of its creation to the modern era. And when we talk about the 1968 Jefferson nickel, we step into a fascinating story that ties together the legacy of Thomas Jefferson, the craftsmanship of Felix Schlag, who designed the coin in the late 1930s, and the broader events of the late 1960s that shaped America in ways that are still felt today. The year 1968 was a year of transformation and turmoil in the United States. The country was dealing with the aftermath of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy. The Vietnam War was raging. Protests were erupting across college campuses, and American society was grappling with questions of civil rights, democracy, and its place in the world. In this charged atmosphere, the mint continued its responsibility of producing coinage for everyday commerce, and among the most familiar pieces struck during that year was the Jefferson nickel, first introduced in 1938 as a replacement for the Buffalo nickel. The Jefferson nickel was designed by German-born sculptor Felix Schlag, who won a national competition to design the coin in 1938. The obverse features a left-facing portrait of Thomas Jefferson, the third President of the United States, author of the Declaration of Independence, and a central figure in American democracy. The reverse features his famous Virginia estate Monticello, which Jefferson himself designed and which stands as a symbol of his intellect and his contradictions, as both an advocate for liberty and a man who owned enslaved people by 1968. Schlag's design had been circulating for 3 decades, and the coin had become a trusted staple in American pockets, purses, and cash registers. Now, what makes the 1968 Jefferson nickel particularly interesting is not just the design itself, but the context of minting in that specific year. Prior to 1968, all proof coins had been struck. In Philadelphia, however, beginning in 1968, proof production was moved permanently to the San Francisco Mint. This marked a turning point in the history of American coinage. The 1968 proof Jefferson nickels struck at San Francisco with the S Mint mark became the very first modern proof coins to carry that designation. Collectors instantly recognized these pieces as significant because they marked the revival of proof coinage after a 3-year hiatus between 1965 and 1967. During that suspension, proof and uncirculated mint sets were replaced with so-called special mint sets, which did not achieve the same level of mirror-like finish and sharp detail that collectors loved. The return of proof coins in 1968, with the Jefferson nickel leading the way, restored a sense of artistry and tradition to American numismatics. The circulation strikes of the 1968 nickel also have a story of their own. The coins were minted at 3 facilities: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Unlike Philadelphia nickels of earlier years, which carried no mint mark, the 1968 issues introduced a permanent change. All mint marks now appeared on the obverse of the coin, just below Jefferson's portrait on the right side near the rim. This was a significant modification, because for decades the placement of mint marks had been a subject of debate, and in 1965 the mint had even removed mint marks entirely to discourage coin hoarding during a nationwide shortage. When the mint marks returned in 1968, their new position on the obverse signaled both a design shift and a renewed sense of transparency for collectors and the general public. In terms of mintage, the 1968 nickels struck at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco circulated widely and were used in everyday commerce across the country. These were not rare in general circulation, but certain varieties and conditions became valuable over time. For example, proof strikes from San Francisco that were particularly well preserved or featured deep cameo contrasts between frosted devices and mirrored fields grew in demand among collectors. Similarly, circulation strikes with full steps on the Monticello reverse, a grading designation that refers to sharp and complete detail in the depiction of the steps, became especially sought after, since most coins did not strike with that level of clarity due to the mint's high-speed production. Understanding the historical role of the 1968 nickel also requires a look at how coinage fit into the broader economic situation of the late 1960s. Inflation was beginning to take hold, and the United States was still adjusting to the removal of silver from its coinage earlier in the decade, while nickels never contained silver except for the wartime alloy years. Between 1942 and 1945, when nickel was needed for the war effort, the public had grown accustomed to seeing design and compositional changes across coin denominations. The Jefferson nickel stood as one of the few coins whose design and metallic composition remained unchanged during this time. Its stability provided a kind of continuity amidst economic uncertainty. Collectors often point out that the 1968 Jefferson nickel is a coin of transitions. It represents the transition from Philadelphia to San Francisco for proof strikes the transition of mint mark placement to the obverse, the transition back to proof production after the special mint set years, and the broader transition of America itself through a decade of upheaval and change. While a single 5-cent piece may seem insignificant, it reflects the story of a nation striving to balance tradition with change and stability with innovation. To truly appreciate the 1968 Jefferson nickel, you have to think about the layers of meaning it carries at the surface. It is simply a common coin struck in the millions and used in daily transactions at gas stations, diners, and grocery stores. But for numismatists, it is an artifact of design, history, monetary policy, and cultural symbolism. The details of its production, the choices made by the mint, and the reception by collectors all combine to give this coin a depth that extends far beyond its face value. By the time you finish studying the history of the 1968 Jefferson nickel, you realize that no coin exists in isolation. Every detail from the placement of a mint mark to the shine of a proof finish tells a story about the people who made it, the time in which it was struck, and the values that shaped the nation. And that is why when you hold a 1968 nickel in your hand, you are not just holding a piece of metal, you are holding a chapter in American history. Imagine holding in your hand a simple 5-cent piece minted in 1974, a coin that millions of people passed through their daily lives never realizing the fascinating history, the artistry, the economic background, and the small but meaningful changes that made this Jefferson nickel not just money, but a part of American culture and heritage. Welcome to the story of the 1974 Jefferson nickel, a coin that continues the proud legacy of American numismatics and reflects the journey of a nation through its economy, politics, and artistry. To understand the Jefferson nickel of 1974, we must first step back and remember why the Jefferson nickel series was introduced in the first place. In 1938, the United States Mint replaced the Buffalo nickel with a new design honoring Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, and one of the most influential figures in American history. The decision came after a design competition in which Felix Schlag, a German-born American sculptor, submitted. The winning entry, Schlag's design, featured a left-facing portrait of Jefferson on the obverse and Monticello, his Virginia estate, on the reverse, and this design would endure with minor modifications for decades. By the time we reach 1974, the Jefferson nickel had been in circulation for 36 years, and the coin continued to be an essential part of daily commerce. It was struck at 3 different mints, the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint, the Philadelphia, and Denver facilities produced the regular circulation strikes, while San Francisco issued proof coins for collectors. The 1974 nickel had a mintage running into the hundreds of millions, making it widely available across the country, but even within this enormous production, there are subtleties, differences, and interesting details that make the coin worthy of a deeper look. The obverse design of the 1974 nickel continues to display the portrait of Jefferson. Though over the decades, the detail of Schlag's original artistry had worn down through repeated dye use and slight modifications, Jefferson's features appear bold yet softened compared to earlier strikes. The inscriptions include, "In God, we trust," to the left of the portrait, "Liberty," with the date 1974 to the right, and the mint mark, if present, just to the right of Jefferson's ponytail. The placement of the mint mark in 1974 is a notable detail, because beginning in 1968, the mint mark was moved to the obverse side beneath. The date before that, it had traditionally appeared on the reverse. The reverse of the 1974 nickel still depicts Monticello Jefferson's iconic home in Charlottesville, Virginia. The design shows the neoclassical architecture with its columned front, and central dome beneath the building is the word Monticello, followed by the denomination 5 cents and the country name United States of America. Above the image is the motto E pluribus unum. The design, though simple, carries a stately appearance and has remained a recognizable symbol of American coinage for generations. From a technical perspective, the 1974 Jefferson nickel was struck in a composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel. This metallic makeup had been used since the end of World War II, when the special wartime alloy of silver, manganese, and copper was discontinued. The return to the copper-nickel blend made the coin durable with a silver-like appearance that has allowed nickels to stand the test of time in circulation. The weight of the coin remained at 5 grams with a diameter of 21.2 millimeters and a plain edge, all of which has been consistent throughout most of the Jefferson nickel series. In terms of mintages, the 1974 Philadelphia nickel saw a production of hundreds of millions, while the Denver Mint also struck large numbers, making the coin widely accessible. The San Francisco Mint created proof coins of the highest quality using specially prepared dies and planchets to produce mirror-like fields and frosted devices. These proof coins were intended for collectors and not for general circulation, making them desirable pieces today. The 1970s were an important period for American coinage, and the 1974 nickel must be seen. Within this context, the country was experiencing economic challenges, inflationary pressures, and changes in daily life. The use of coinage remained central to commerce, vending machines, transit fares, and countless small transactions. The nickel especially played a vital role since it bridged the gap between the penny and higher denominations in daily trade. From a collector's perspective, the 1974 Jefferson nickel might appear common at first glance because of its large mintages. However, condition rarity plays a huge role. Coins that survive in uncirculated grades, particularly those with sharp strikes and attractive luster, are always of interest. Proof versions, especially deep cameo examples from San Francisco, are considered premium by collectors. Another fascinating aspect lies in error coins of 1974. As with any large-scale production, mint errors such as off-center strikes, double strikes, die cracks, or planchet flaws exist, and these mistakes can transform a common nickel into a rare collectible, commanding much higher value in the numismatic marketplace. The grading of Jefferson nickels, including the 1974 issue, is an area of study in itself. Professional grading companies evaluate strike, sharpness, luster surface, preservation, and overall eye appeal. The highest levels of mint state condition can drastically increase the desirability of a coin. For example, a 1974 nickel graded at MS66 or higher may be far scarcer than its huge mintage suggests. Due to the difficulty of preserving coins free of contact marks and wear, when examining proof nickels of 1974, collectors pay close attention to cameo and deep cameo contrasts, where the frosted portrait and Monticello stand out sharply. Against the reflective mirror-like fields, the development of this proof quality was a hallmark of San Francisco production in the 1970s, and a deep cameo example from 1974 is highly sought after today. Beyond the numismatic factors, the 1974 nickel is a window into American life. At the time, it was the age of post-Vietnam society. The Watergate scandal was shaking. The political system, inflation was impacting the economy, and the American people were dealing with rapid cultural change. Yet through all this, the Jefferson nickel remained a constant symbol of stability in everyday commerce. To put the 1974 nickel into perspective, within the larger series, it represents a continuation of the long-standing Schlag design, which would remain in place until 2004, when the Westward Journey nickel series introduced new designs marking the bicentennial of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Thus, the 1974 issue falls within what many collectors call the classic era of Jefferson nickels, an era defined by traditional imagery and widespread use. For the advanced collector varieties of 1974, nickels can offer further intrigue. Die varieties, including repunched mint marks, doubled dies, and other small details, are studied carefully by specialists. Some varieties may only be known to a few experts, but they highlight the complexity and craftsmanship involved in minting millions of coins every year. The Jefferson nickel series has long been a favorite for beginning collectors because the coins are affordable, widely available, and historically rich. A complete date and mint mark collection of Jefferson nickels provides a journey through American history from the late 1930s to the modern day, and the 1974 nickel holds its rightful place within. This narrative, while perhaps not rare in absolute numbers, it becomes significant as part of the long continuum of American coinage. As we reflect on the 1974 nickel, we realize that every coin has two stories. One is the technical story of its creation, the dies, the mints, the alloys, the mintages, the grades, and the varieties. The other is the human story of the time period, the hands it passed through, the economic backdrop, the historical events shaping the nation together. These stories make the Jefferson nickel not just a 5-cent piece, but a living artifact of American life. So when you hold a 1974 Jefferson nickel, remember that it is more than spare change. It is a link to Thomas Jefferson, to Felix Schlag, to the mints that produced it, and to the millions of Americans who used it in their daily lives. It is a coin that may seem ordinary, but carries with it extraordinary meaning in the world of numismatics and history, and that is the power of a simple nickel. Have you ever held a small 5-cent piece in your hand and wondered if it carried with it a hidden story, one that goes beyond the everyday exchange of goods and services, one that reveals a piece of American history, artistry, and economic design? The Jefferson nickel of 1975 is one such coin, a coin that on the surface might seem ordinary because millions were struck and used in circulation, but upon deeper exploration, it unfolds into a remarkable journey through numismatic history, minting, practices, and the American spirit that continued to define coinage during the mid-1970s. The 1975 Jefferson nickel belongs to a long line of coins that started in 1938 when the United States Mint decided to replace the Buffalo nickel with a design honoring the third president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, and the structure most closely associated with him, Monticello, the neoclassical home he designed in Virginia. The nickel design, created by Felix Schlag, became one of the longest-running coin designs in American history, and by 1975 it had already been in production for nearly 4 decades through war shortages, minting changes, and countless economic shifts. The year 1975 itself is significant in American numismatic history, because it stands right before one of the most important bicentennial celebrations in United States coinage, the bicentennial of 1976, that introduced new quarter, half dollar, and dollar coin designs. However, the Jefferson nickel was not changed. For the bicentennial, instead, it retained its classic Schlag design and continued to be a workhorse coin in circulation. The 1975 nickel thus represents a fascinating point in the timeline. It was a coin bridging the years before the bicentennial, without fanfare, yet maintaining the legacy of Jefferson on the 5-cent piece. In 1975, the nickel was struck at 3 main facilities: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Philadelphia produced the 1975 Jefferson nickels without a mint mark. Denver used the D mint mark, and San Francisco issued proof coins with the S mint mark. These variations are critical to collectors because while millions were struck, not all coins survived in pristine condition. Circulation wear quickly reduced sharpness of design, and many coins ended up lost, damaged, or melted. The proof issues from San Francisco are especially sought after because they were not meant for circulation but for collectors and were struck with polished dies, giving them mirror-like finishes that stand in contrast to regular issues. The composition of the 1975 Jefferson nickel remained the same as it had been since the end of World War II. It was made of a copper-nickel alloy consisting of 75% copper and 25% nickel. This gave it durability and a distinctive silvery appearance. During the war years, the alloy had been temporarily changed to include silver due to wartime shortages. But by 1975, the original copper-nickel formula had long been Restored, this composition was chosen not only for its resilience but also for the way it worked in vending machines, which became an increasingly important factor in coin design during the 20th century. From a design perspective, the 1975 Jefferson nickel carried Schlag's classic portrait of Jefferson on the obverse, his profile facing left with the word "Liberty" to the left, the motto, "In God We Trust," and the date, 1975, clearly visible. The reverse showed Monticello Jefferson's home with its domed architecture and neoclassical balance. The inscriptions Monticello e Pluribus Unum and United States of America. 5 cents framed the design. This design had remained largely unchanged since 1938, though over the years slight modifications had been made to improve detail and clarity. Collectors today analyze the 1975 Jefferson nickel, not just for its basic history, but also for the many varieties and errors that arose in its production. The mid-1970s saw high mintages, but also saw instances of striking anomalies, including off-center strikes, weak strikes, and die breaks that created fascinating error coins, which now command significant interest in the numismatic market. Proof nickels from San Francisco in deep cameo condition, where the raised design appears frosty against mirror fields, are particularly desirable and can bring high values when graded by professional services. The coin's historical context adds another layer of richness to its story. America in 1975 was a nation in transition, still healing from the Vietnam War, adjusting to economic pressures of inflation and oil crises, and looking forward to the bicentennial celebration of 1976. Coins like the 1975 nickel served not just as currency, but as daily reminders of continuity and tradition. Jefferson's face on the coin reflected ideals of liberty, knowledge, and innovation, which were especially resonant during times of challenge. The nickel was small, yet symbolic, an object of everyday life. Carrying profound meaning for 2 hours, one can trace the path of this coin from its origins in Schlag's winning design in 1938 through the wartime silver nickels of the 1940s into the post-war era of mass circulation and vending machine culture. And finally into the mid-1970s, when the United States Mint continued to strike billions of coins annually. The 1975 Jefferson nickel is a chapter in this evolving narrative, a coin that, despite its abundance, retains importance for collectors, historians, and ordinary Americans who unknowingly carried a piece of that story in their pockets. When examining the 1975 nickel in a professional numismatic context, we must also look at the grading scale used to assess its condition. Coins range from poor and heavily worn to mint state examples with full steps on Monticello, a designation that refers to the clarity of the steps on the building's design. These full-step nickels are highly prized because they demonstrate a strong strike and preservation. From circulation in 1975, full-step examples are scarcer and command premiums because most nickels from that year did not survive with such detail intact. The lasting legacy of the 1975 Jefferson nickel is not that it introduced a dramatic new design or commemorated a historic event, but rather that it quietly carried forward the tradition of Jefferson's place on the nickel as America prepared for its bicentennial. The coin is a reminder that even in years of continuity, coins reflect the values, priorities, and craftsmanship of their time. Collectors treasure it for its varieties, proof issues, and condition rarities, while historians see it as part of a broader narrative of American coinage. So when you hold a 1975 Jefferson nickel in your hand, you are not just holding a small 5-cent piece. You are holding a continuation of a story that began in 1938. You are holding a coin that passed through millions of transactions in an America that was changing rapidly. You are holding a piece of artistry struck in copper and nickel that connected past, present, and future, and you are holding a symbol of Jefferson's enduring legacy on American money.